Okay, so for today's episode of Rare, we are welcoming Tom Poulos to speak. And Tom is a strategic, high-performance medical leader within the biopharmaceutical environment, with experience in global and regional medical affairs and strategy, medical education, evidence generation, patient advocacy and engagement, of which more than a decade is in rare diseases. So Tom is a business-minded, dynamic and strategic team leader and player with a strong sense of purpose, having progressed through companies such as Sanofi, Shire and Ultragenyx. So welcome, Tom. Can you tell us a bit about your journey so far?
Sure. Thank you, Laura, for the introduction. So I studied medicine in the Netherlands. I'm originally from the Netherlands, and I did my medicine degree in Utrecht. And actually, since 2002, I'm working in the industry already. So over 20 years. As you just mentioned, been in a couple of companies. Started with Solvay, then Sanofi, Syntelabo actually, and then after the merge in Sanofi Aventis. And I moved from the Netherlands to Switzerland in January 2011 when I started working for Shire in Nyon in the Geneva region. I was there about a year in Shire and in hematology and nephrology. And then I moved to rare diseases, internally mucopolysaccharidosis first. And then I continued actually the journey in rare diseases until today. And it's something which I'm really passionate about. So as you said, after Shire, I went to Ultragenyx. After Ultragenyx, I worked for a very, very small Dutch biotech company, also in rare diseases, mitochondrial disorders. And then actually you caught me well today because I just started my journey today with Acadia Pharmaceuticals, which is very exciting. And they are focusing on Rett Syndrome in Europe, which is also a rare disease where there's currently no treatment available. So that's where we are today, Laura.
Okay, great. And congratulations on the new role.
Thank you very much.
So you do have a lot of experience within rare and ultra rare conditions where there are no existing treatments. So what would you say are the two biggest challenges faced in those fields?
Yeah, so I think one of the key aspects, but it goes across all rare diseases, but particularly where there's no treatment available, of course, because we know that then there's less of a engagement, from industry, but also from patient advocacy groups and lack of funding. It's always about awareness, diagnosis, and I think that's a crucial aspect for patients, families, but of course also for caregivers. If it's a rare, ultra rare disorder and there's no treatment available, many times, those patients and those caregivers have to deal with the disease themselves. And I've been experiencing, many rare diseases where we were sort of first to enter the market. And, the caregivers and patients very much appreciated the collaboration and the interest and the awareness of the disease, including the physicians as well, right? Because they had a potential hope or treatment to give to those patients, where generally they just, manage the symptoms and so on. So the challenge clearly is on the diagnostics and the awareness in a broader sense, even also amongst payers and regulators. So that's, of course, a huge effort. And then hand in hand goes with that is understanding the disease pretty well, which also means it's deciding and finding proper endpoints for clinical trials. And this is really something which is very difficult if you start early. You don't know enough about the disease or how the current management is being done. And then many times what you see actually is that clinical trials are being designed with endpoints. They might sound solid for regulators, but then they're not feasible in clinical practice, either in clinics or even patients or caregivers. It's very hard for them to do these assessments. So I think those are the two real biggest challenges. It's on the disease, diagnostics awareness, and then for sure on basically trailblazing clinical trial endpoints, and hopefully they work. And sometimes you even have to develop like a questionnaire particularly to the disease because there's nothing existing generally. And sometimes validation of such a questionnaire might take also 2 years, right? So there's a lot of planning ahead and thinking about what you want to do.
Yeah. Well, on the flip side to that, what are the positive things that you witness in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is really great, and I've always been very close to the patient community, which I love so much and I'm very passionate about. is the gratitude and the willingness to collaborate. And of course, they might see some hope coming also on the horizon. So I think the openness and the collaboration is really great. It's a small community in general, particularly if it's an ultra rare disease or rare disease. And in Europe, there's an additional difficulty about the languages. So sometimes there's even not really organized patient advocacy groups. It's sort of a bunch of parents running it, and they can't speak to each other because generally they only speak their local languages and not always proper English. So I think they're very, very willing to collaborate and very, thankful and grateful that companies are moving into the space to help them create, awareness and a potential treatment option as well. So I think that is really something which I've experienced myself, and also on the physician side. Working at Sanofi in the beginning, cardiovascular, for example, right? You're one of the 7 or 10 treatments, and you have to really bang on doors to be able to speak to a physician. Whereas in the rare disease community, if there's nothing existing, they're very willing to collaborate also and maybe discuss about the disease itself, or potentially on clinical trial design, on endpoints and those kind of things. So they're very open to have this, partnership together with the industry. Of course, with its rules and regulations, but that's really something which is nice. And I think on the other hand, I mean, to have the opportunity as an organization to trailblaze and, be, let's say, consistent and be really persuasive to get your endpoints in your trial, to the finish line, and then have a treatment available for those patients and families in need where there's currently nothing available. I mean, it's so rewarding, and you really get up every morning like, this is something I really feel so good and I want to do it. And it's rewarding, of course, in the end for the company, and for sure for patients and the whole community, including, of course, physicians who then have something to provide to the patients as well, right? It's so there's definitely opportunities, but I think every challenge has its opportunity. So it's just the way companies approach it and how people look at it.
Yeah. And what do you think that the future holds for companies wanting to move into the rare disease space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of excitement. Of course, there's been a lot of setbacks as well. We've seen in Europe, particularly on the pricing issues, and of course, the post-COVID and the economical sort of crisis in Europe across many countries doesn't help on a reimbursement scale. But I also think that companies sort of need to rethink their longer-term strategy and see it as a more portfolio approach rather than an individual rare disease treatment where they want to sort of get a return of investment on a one single program. For example, Ultragenyx, where I used to work, has done a great example, I think, and trailblazing as well in this area, where they said, we always want to have 1 or 2 ultra-rare diseases in our pipeline portfolio. We know it might not be commercially viable, yet if you spread it out over multiple programs, it's really also some goodwill, and it's really something where there's a huge need. I mean, we know there's about 7,000 plus rare diseases globally, and only about 10,000 of them are being currently addressed. So, and then also the regulators, and for example, in Europe, the EMA and the European Commission, right, they just implemented a new EU pharmaceutical strategy. And one of the key things, there's still a bit of a discussion on the definition, but you got the unmet medical need and the high unmet medical need. And, the high unmet medical need is basically by definition rare diseases where there's no treatment available. And they are proposing to have an extension of 2 years exclusivity. So those kind of things, there's some incentive. It's not easy, but I think the pricing should be realistic and should not be on a one-on-one return of investment, but should be spread across. Because in the end, we should all work towards making the treatments available to all the patients in need as much as possible. We know that not everyone can pay for it, and the economics are different in Europe, but we should at least have this in mind and not first, generating revenue and set these ridiculously high prices, for example, like with gene therapy. I think there's always a middle way where the mind should always be, on the patient and say, how can we best serve them? But still, of course, make it commercially viable for the investors and for the community. But there's multiple ways, I think. So moving to the rare disease space, don't go only for rare disease because it sounds nice and you can ask for high prices, but have it as a portfolio strategy and really think long term. And then it's really, really worth it and rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. It's been especially the past couple of years, a very tricky market within Europe within rare disease. So, but that ends our discussion. So thank you so much for your time, Tom, and for sharing all of your thoughts.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.